let's get this thing on the road. First of all, I'm James Cockrell. I'm the Commissioner of the Alaska Department of Public Safety. I just want to welcome everybody, all the guests, legislators, the governor, for setting this up. This is a momentous occasion when it comes to providing tools for law enforcement. And with the signature of House Bill 66, this is a continuation of the administration's strive to make Alaska safe. I want to welcome you to our Department of Public Safety hangar. Most people don't realize that we have the largest aircraft fleet of any law enforcement agency in this country. And we're very proud of it. We're really proud of what we do with our aircraft in this hangar facility. So I'll get my speech up and going. Today is a great day for Alaska law enforcement, the men and women standing behind me. And I appreciate their attendance today. And those patrolling across the state will gain many tools with the signing of HB 66. Most notably, offender can now be charged with second-degree murder if they knowingly manufacture or deliver illicit drugs and to another person that dies as a result of those drugs. Tragically, Alaska's rate of overdose deaths is continuing to rise because of fentanyl flooding into Alaska coming through our southern border. Recently, troopers based out of the airport seized over 4,600 potential fatal overdoses of fentanyl-laced counterfeit pills bound for a small western Alaska village of less than 1,000 residents. That was enough fentanyl to kill every man, woman, and child in that community 4 times over. Recently, in the past month, our Alaska State Troopers and Task Force officers at the airport have seized over 50 pounds of drugs in 1 month coming into our state. Last year, Alaska law enforcement seized almost 42 million potential fatal doses of fentanyl across the state, yet tragically, we still lost 342 Alaskans to overdose deaths in 2023. HB 66 will allow law enforcement to hold those who are killing Alaskans accountable for the destruction that they are causing and the valuable lives that they are taking. Your Alaska State Troopers will continue to be committed to working with our local, state, and federal law enforcement partners to aggressively dismantle and disrupt drug trafficking organizations across the state. And again, I really appreciate everybody here, especially our legislators, because they've done nothing but support the Alaska State Troopers and Department of Public Safety. With that said, I'd like to bring up Alaska Attorney General Trigg Taylor.
Thank you, Commissioner Cockrell. It's my pleasure to be here today. I love press conferences where I'm able to smile because we've been able to accomplish something here that's going to help law enforcement, it's going to help crime victims. The omnibus crime bill that we're here to sign today, or the governor will sign today, represents a lot of hard work from a lot of different individuals, including concerned members of our community, crime victims, members of the legislature, and many public servants in the executive branch under the leadership of our Governor Dunleavy. There are many parts of this legislation, so I wanted to just give a high-level overview of some of those parts. First, Commissioner Cockrell already spoke about the raising the stakes for those that push drugs in our communities. Drug dealers will now be facing charges of murder in the second degree when a buyer overdoses. The bill also clarifies sex trafficking laws and creates a new offense of being a patron of a victim of sex trafficking. It creates a new crime of assault in the presence of a child, charged when a person engages in domestic violence or sex assault and there's a child present in the dwelling. The bill increases the penalty for stalkers who continue to stalk after a protective order is issued. It ensures appropriate sentencing for violating multiple conditions of release. It requires sex offenders coming from other states to register in Alaska and to provide additional information that help protect our communities. The bill will also provide victims of certain crimes additional information designed to help keep them safe. It expands our involuntary commitment law, which comes into play when a person has been found incompetent to stand trial for criminal charges. And it provides a mechanism for making sure a person has an order for involuntary commitment before they are taken into custody by law enforcement. And finally, it protects survivors of crime from having to unnecessarily appear before a grand jury and relive their attack. They can now wait until trial to provide their testimony. I am proud of this legislation and firmly believe that it does make Alaska a safer and better place to live and to raise our families. Thank you. With that, I'll turn the time over to the Governor of Alaska, Mike Dunleavy.
Well, first of all, thank you all for being here today. This is an important milestone for the state of Alaska. I want to thank all these folks behind me, too, who are on the front lines and have to deal with the issues of crime here in the state of Alaska. I want to thank all of you in the audience. I see a lot of folks that, unfortunately for us, have been touched by crime. I don't think there's a person you know in Alaska that hasn't been touched by crime in one form or another. And the last couple months, I've had to make some forays out of the state of Alaska and go to other cities, both in North America and in the United States for business. And you know, as awful as some of our statistics are that we're working on, and we're getting better at it, there are places in this country that literally have no-go zones, very dangerous places. It's just a reminder to me that we have a lot of work to do in Alaska, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done across this country. And I want to thank everyone that's been involved in putting this together. Shreg had mentioned what was the components of this bill. Again, by closing the loopholes and narrowing in on the fentanyl crisis and making the road to justice easier for those who are victims of sex crimes. The legislation marks a significant milestone in our ongoing commitment to public safety. Alaska, unfortunately, we suffer one of the highest statistical, I guess, unfortunately, milestones of having a high domestic abuse situation as well as sex abuse of children. And we are constantly affecting that through legislation, regulation, and budgets. And again, I want to thank everyone for putting a focus on the most vulnerable of our Alaskans. And we need to keep doing that until we actually see a cultural shift, a driving down of those crime rates, because quite frankly, I don't think any of us are proud of them. And it's the motivation to do better. So as was mentioned, this bill closes sex offender loopholes. And if you're convicted of sex crime outside of Alaska, you have to register now as a sex offender if you're residing here in Alaska. There was a loophole there. It does make it a second-degree murder to knowingly manufacture or deliver certain controlled substances, and a person dies as the direct result of that action. So many of Alaskans, so many Americans have been touched by the fentanyl crisis, the opiate crisis, and other drug crises that we've had to deal with. And for anyone to consciously say, we don't care, the profit motive is all that matters, we don't care who the victims are, we don't care how many people die, we don't care how many kids are impacted, we don't care about how many accidental poisonings there are, we're going to remind them that they better start caring. Because if they don't care, they're going to be charged with second-degree murder. And there's a lot of us that have had conversations about increasing the penalties for this, because this is so important. And as I mentioned earlier, we all have been impacted by crime. We know people that have been impacted by crime. But this crisis, not just in Alaska, but across this country, is truly a man-made crisis, as crime is. But this one has caused so much pain and anguish in the state of Alaska. Adds a new crime for assault in the presence of a child. Adds to the crime of stalking when a stalking or sexual assault protective order is violated. Adds to the crime of human trafficking when a person is induced to engage in adult entertainment or labor. Changes the term child pornography to child sexual abuse material to reflect the heinous crime and traumatic impact this has on children. Expands the definition of a sexual felony to include a patron of a victim of sex trafficking. Expands the definition of domestic violence to include interference with a report of domestic violence. Changes grand jury process to decrease trauma for victims by allowing key witnesses, typically the officer in the case, to summarize the testimony of other witnesses. I mean, this has been a tough one, especially when you're dealing with children, especially you're dealing with victims of this type of crime. As I mentioned, I want to thank everyone. There's an individual that's not here today, Representative Craig Johnson, who was instrumental, as well as a number of folks here, in getting this bill passed. And bills like this are not easy because there's a lot of different viewpoints and what a bill should look like at the end. But again, I think what we have here is we move Alaska forward, and what we're going to do is get right back to work here probably next week on looking at all the bills and regulations and loopholes that we have and making it even a better place for Alaska. So Representative Johnson, we met at the beginning of the 2023 legislative session to talk about crime. And it quickly became evident how personally important it was to him. Again, all of us have been impacted by crime, and some more so than others, to address the fentanyl crisis. And I'd just like to take a moment for all of us to recognize the families and victims who have lost loved ones to the overdose crisis, the fentanyl crisis. And if we could just take a moment and just think about that, because there's a number of folks here, here today that have been directly impacted or know people that have. And then finally, I'm going to be turning this over to Deputy Attorney General John Skidmore to get into some detail. But again, I want to thank everyone for being part of this. And there are people that couldn't be here today that were part of this. And I look forward to working with each and every one of you on making Alaska a much safer place than it is. We got a lot of work to do. But anyway, John.
HB 66 makes Alaska a safer place. That's the bottom line. It makes it a safer place, and it gives victims all across the state a greater voice in the criminal justice system. It gives them that voice by allowing them to more actively participate when there are individuals charged with crimes, and there's a civil commitment because the person can't be charged, can't be held criminally accountable because they're found incompetent. It gives victims a greater voice and greater protections by allowing us, the prosecutors, to not have to re-traumatize them by calling them mere days after they've been victimized, sometimes suffering one of the worst days of their life, into grand jury to retell that story, that horrible account of what happened to them, to 12 to 18 complete strangers. And instead, this bill brings us in Alaska in line with over 30 other jurisdictions, including the federal government, by allowing prosecutors to simply call the hardworking men and women that you see behind us here law enforcement officers, to summarize their investigation and to present to the grand jury the information that says that somebody should be held accountable. These are monumental changes for us and something that each and every one of us should be proud of. It won't take effect until January of 2025. That's to allow us to have time to train and to prepare all those within the criminal justice system for these significant changes that will be coming forward. But it is also something that I would echo the comments of the governor on. This is not something that comes to fruition because of the efforts of one person or two people. This is truly a team effort. There are so many of you in the audience that I had the pleasure of working with throughout this last legislative session to try and help bring this forward. The number of people that there are to thank, I don't think I could list them all right now, but I do want to highlight just a couple of folks. Where I'd like to start is I'd like to start by thanking Governor Dunleavy. It is his leadership on public safety that has allowed us to pursue these issues, and it's that leadership and support that has made our state a safer place, that has resulted in us having the lowest crime rates in the last 40 years. Let me say that again. The lowest crime rates in the last 40 years. It is under his leadership that we've been able to achieve that. Bringing together a bill like this is not possible without the help and support of those in the legislature. There are individuals from the legislature here today. If I were to call out any of them, the few people that I would call out immediately would be Senator Matt Clayman, who will have a chance to speak after me. As the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, he took great strides to bring together multiple different pieces of legislation to provide us with the bill that we have in front of us today, and I want to thank him for those efforts. I want to thank Craig Johnson's staff, Patricia Babcock, who was here and played a tremendous role in working behind the scenes to help bring all of this together. She deserves our thanks. All of the House Majority Caucus and the Senate Majority Caucus played key and significant roles in helping us. But of course, we can't get to any of these places without the voices of the victims and the advocates. Brenda Stanfield, Lori Morton, Angela Harris, and Sandy Snodgrass were all victims or victim advocates who were instrumental in sharing their voices and helping to galvanize our elected leaders to take this very important and positive step. And last but not least, I would be remiss if I didn't say my personal thanks to those that I work most closely with in my department. The Criminal Division Director, Angie Kemp, stepped in it multiple times to help move this piece of legislation forward when I was unavailable. Casey Schroeder helped to draft it and is the expert in all things for the legislature for our department. And her support from Katie, who is a new person that's come to join us in the last year, was an intern with us before. She has a very bright beginning, and I'm pleased that she could be here to see this celebration as we move forward. I want to thank everyone for their work on this, and at this point, I'll turn the floor and the microphone over to Senator Matt Clayman, the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee.
Good morning. I'm Senator Matt Clayman, chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and as we sometimes say, welcome to Senate District H. More people come through this district than any other district in the state because it's the airport. Governor Dunleavy, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. It is an honor to be here with you all. Thank you for signing this essential piece of legislation. This legislation began with the shocking news in February 2022 that a man had stabbed Angela Harris in the back while she was returning books at the Lusac Library. The man who attacked Angela had attacked two women just weeks before, and they had dismissed the charges against the man because he was incompetent to stand trial. The attack on Angela Harris highlighted a gap in our justice system. We introduced Senate Bill 53, which is part of this legislation to close that gap. Thank you, Angela. You were a fierce and courageous advocate. Coming to Juneau again and again, sharing your story with legislators and Governor Dunleavy. You testified before every committee that heard Senate Bill 53. I know it wasn't easy, but we couldn't have made it here without you. You never gave up, and your passion made sure that we did not give up. With the governor signing this essential piece of legislation, dangerous individuals who are incompetent to stand trial will be held and evaluated for involuntary commitment. Victims of crime who now have the right will now have the right to attend involuntary commitment hearings of those who attacked them, and they will have the right to know the status of those involuntary commitment proceedings going forward. This legislation will help protect all Alaskans. Another important feature of House Bill 66 are the sex trafficking changes. The bill adds a detailed definition of inducing and causing a person to engage in commercial sexual conduct, and it establishes a new offense of being a patron of a victim of sex trafficking, With this legislation, Alaska is taking important steps to address human trafficking and sex trafficking in our state. The last component I want to highlight are changes to the rules of criminal procedure to allow public safety officers to present hearsay statements of crime victims to the grand jury. The court rules in 37 of our sister states allow grand jury hearsay. So do the federal rules. So let's look very briefly at a little data. The FBI publishes uniform crime statistics for every state in the Union dating back to the early 1980s. Looking at the graph, it compares Alaska's per capita rape rate with the national rape rate over time. We have been 2 to 3 times the national rate for over 40 years. Currently, Alaska has a per capita rape rate of 134, the highest in the nation. The national average is 40. Alaska is over 3 times the national average. By comparison, Washington, our closest neighbor, has a rape rate of 39.2, just under the national average, and much lower than Alaska. The 4 states with the lowest rape rates are New Jersey, Connecticut, Delaware, and Massachusetts, all well below the national average. I believe we must all be challenged by this unacceptable disparity. The policy changes that we have tried over the decades to try and address sexual violence in our state have not made meaningful changes. And we know from victimization surveys and across the nation and in Alaska that crimes of sexual violence are underreported. So we must do better. One step is to make the criminal justice system more accessible and more trustworthy for victims of rape and other crimes of sexual violence. And that's part of why in 1994 we added victims' rights as an amendment to the Alaska Constitution. You might ask, what do Washington and the other 4 states I referenced with the lowest rape rates have in common? They all permit police officers to provide hearsay testimony of crime victims to the grand jury. The crime data and common sense tell us we should do the same thing. That's why House Bill 66 changes the court rule to allow grand jury hearsay. By allowing peace officers to present a victim's hearsay statements to the grand jury, we're telling victims that we hear them and we're working to minimize the trauma that they experience while seeking justice. The Alaska Network on Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault and other activist groups support this feature. They support helping victims of rape and child sexual abuse to avoid re-experiencing and reliving their trauma when they testify to a grand jury. Yes, there is more work to be done, and it will take more than this change to the court rules about hearsay testimony to grand juries. But I am confident that this change in House Bill 66 will improve the relationship that victims have with our criminal justice system, and it will lead to safer communities all across Alaska. In closing, House Bill 66 makes important progress in our work to improve public safety and make wise use of our public safety resources. It reflects collaborative work with the House, the Senate, the courts, the Department of Law, and the executive branch. So, Governor, thank you very much, and thank you again for signing this bill into law today. And last, Angela, I want to thank you for your fierce and courageous work on this legislation. And I'd ask you to come forward now with your remarks.
I'm gonna stand, actually. Thank you.
You're doing great. Thank you.
When the DA said my assailant could have murdered me and still walked the streets freely due to his incompetence and inability to be restored, I knew change needed to be made. Senator Clayman, I appreciate you and your staff for allowing me to share my story and efforts to bring necessary change. There are many of you in and out of this room who work together to incorporate SB 53 into HB 66, and for that I'm eternally grateful. I pray that this is just the beginning of providing assistance with mentally ill persons who are a threat in our state. Thank you. Now we'll hear from Sandy.
My name is Sandy Snodgrass. I'm the director of AK Fentanyl Response. More importantly, I'm Bruce's mother. Thank you, Governor Dunleavy, for asking me to speak today. When my only child, Bruce Snodgrass, was a victim of a drug-induced homicide on October 26, 2021, here in Anchorage, law enforcement and prosecutors did not have the option to file second-degree murder charges. Bruce, only 22 years old, unknowingly received fentanyl and tragically died where he stood. This happened within shouting distance of help in a wooded area behind a Wells Fargo drive-thru and McDonald's drive-thru beside the Carr's grocery store on Boniface and DeBar Road. His body was discovered 2 days later by a dog walker. No one has been arrested, charged, or convicted for his murder. Today marks the culmination of 2 years of hard work of many dedicated individuals with the signing of House Bill 66. This law will bring justice to families who have lost loved ones and will help prevent further loss of life by stopping individuals who are dealing poison to our people. This law will prevent drug dealers from being released back into our communities to continue victimizing Alaskans with their poison. This law will save lives. There are individuals who knowingly sell fentanyl and tell their customers, "This is fentanyl. Make sure you have a naloxone when you use this so you don't die." When a death occurs under these circumstances, that dealer most assuredly is guilty of second-degree murder and needs to be removed from our society to prevent them from continuing to poison Alaskans. This law is an important tool in our toolbox to combat the scourge that fentanyl is wreaking in our state. However, it's only one tool. We need all the tools we can get to fight against fentanyl effectively. We must hold drug dealers accountable for their actions. These individuals are not just selling drugs, they're selling death. Fentanyl is a lethal substance that can kill in minuscule amounts, and those who distribute it are fully aware of its deadly potential. By holding these dealers accountable, we're sending a clear message that our community will not tolerate reckless endangerment of our citizens. Moreover, the ripple effect of a single fentanyl death is devastating. Families are torn apart and communities are left grappling with the aftermath. The emotional, psychological, and financial toll on families is immeasurable. No parent should have to experience the pain of losing a child to such a preventable cause. By enforcing stringent penalties, we can deter others from engaging in this deadly trade. Drug dealers often target vulnerable populations, preying on individuals struggling with addiction, mental health issues, and economic hardships. By removing these predatory dealers from our streets, we're protecting our most vulnerable citizens and giving them a chance to seek help and recovery without the constant threat of this deadly substance being pushed on them. Furthermore, holding drug dealers accountable is a matter of public safety. Fentanyl poses a significant risk not only to the users, but also to the first responders and the law enforcement officers who may be inadvertently come in contact with it. By cracking down on those who distribute fentanyl, we're reducing the risk to everyone in the community. We need comprehensive education, prevention programs to inform youth and the public about the dangers of fentanyl and other opioids. We need to increase support for addiction, treatment, and recovery services to help those struggling to break from the cycle of addiction. And we need to continue to collaborate between law enforcement, public health officials, and community organizations to create a united front against this epidemic. In conclusion, the signing of HB 66 is a monumental step forward in our fight against fentanyl. It honors the memory of those we have lost, including my beloved son, Bruce. And it represents our commitment to protecting our community from further tragedy. Let us continue to work together, using every tool at our disposal to combat the fentanyl crisis and save lives. Thank you.
So before we sign the bill, and we're going to have folks come up here and gather around, because I think this is a very important occasion. It's another benchmark, again, for Alaska. I just wanted to sort of close before we do the signing, but public safety is job number one for any executive anywhere in the world, and it has been throughout history. If you can't provide a safe place for our most vulnerable, our kids, our elders, and society as a whole, then you've failed. And so, as I mentioned earlier, the crime statistics are a real motivator, I think, for all of us to continually make this a better place. I think Alaska is the greatest state in the country. It's got incredible potential. It's the greatest country in the world, the United States. And for 350 million people in this country, with the form of government that we have, where there's a lot of freedoms and we have to protect those freedoms, but the expectation is that every American and every Alaskan has the right to be able to go to their job, be safe in their house, be safe in their car, their kids are safe. I mean, that is a cornerstone for any effective government anywhere on the planet. And so our commitment to the people of Alaska, with the help of the great people behind me and a number of amazing people here in the audience, is to continually take a look at our system, continue to look at how we can help people, and how we can prevent tragedies, a number of which we ourselves have experienced, and many here in the audience have. And so I just want to thank everyone for being here today. What we're going to do is I'm going to have some of my staff bring up some folks here that were very, very significant, both in being impacted by crime, but also significant in their work at making this a better place. So with that, we can start getting some folks up here and getting around that. We can get to the point of signing this bill. Once the bill is signed, it's the law of the land here in the state of Alaska. So I'm going to ask Laura and her staff and others to bring some folks up here. I think what we'll do is have you stand there. I think we'll have Angela there, have you stand over here. Is anybody the techie guy that can unplug this for a moment so we can move this out of the way? Do we have a techie person here? There's a